Discover the incredible connection that transformed two lives, a black waitress and a Japanese chef. Raindrops tapped furiously against the diner windows as Jasmine glanced at the clock ticking above the counter. The greasy smell of bacon lingered in the air, mingling with her own fatigue. 10-hour shifts blurred into one another, each day a relentless cycle of plates and tips that hardly scratched the surface of what she needed. Usually she found solace in the heat of the kitchen, but today that solace seemed a distant dream. Jasmine's ex-husband had long chased after his fame, leaving her with 2 kids, stacks of bills, and a gnawing ambition to create, to become not just another waitress, but a chef with a legacy to leave behind. As she poured coffee into a chipped mug, the familiar doubt crept in. What if she never escaped this job? The fear twisted in her stomach like a coiled snake, squeezing her breath away. She could already hear her children's innocent questions echoing in her mind. "Mom, why can't you cook like the chefs on TV?" Despite her flair for blending spices, she felt unworthy of their expectations, shackled by a life she didn't choose. The door swung open, letting in a gust of wet air. In walked Hiro, an unfamiliar figure with eyes that sparkled with dreams buried beneath layers of loss. A chef from Tokyo, much like herself, but haunted by a recent past that fell apart under the weight of prejudice. She served him a sandwich special, her heart racing, not just because she needed the tip, but for something deeper, validation perhaps. When he complimented her unorthodox flavors, she felt an ember of hope reignite. "Your cooking, it's like a story," he said, surprising her. "May I see your kitchen?" Jasmine hesitated, mind racing. Could she dare step outside the familiar walls of her diner? Doubts tumbled like dice in her mind. She didn't have time for this, but something tugged at her. This could be the chance she yearned for, that singular moment of destiny. After a brief consideration, she found herself nodding, the flicker of ambition fueling her determination. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. In the kitchen, spices danced through the air as Hiro and Jasmine exchanged techniques. It was liberation wrapped in flour dust and simmering dreams. But peeking through their newfound camaraderie were whispers of discontent. A rival chef at the diner, sensing an unfamiliar spark, began sabotaging Jasmine's efforts.
Unpaid shifts crept up, piling on emotional weight on her already weary shoulders. She wrestled with spiraling self-doubt as her children needed her, yet her heart ached to create. The clock on the wall ticked louder, echoing her internal chaos. The upcoming food competition loomed ominously. Jasmine's dreams collided with fear, shoving her against the wall of insecurity. What if she froze in front of the judges? What if her voice, a voice she yearned to own, was drowned out? Anxiety twisted inside her like a storm. Standing at the precipice of her culinary aspirations, Jasmine felt like she was teetering on the edge of a void. The stakes were rising, the pressure pinching the air from her lungs, but still she could almost taste the possibilities. Would she leap into her dreams, or let hesitation guide her back into the shadows of her current life? Jasmine stood in her kitchen, the heat from the stove mixing with the swirling maelstrom of her emotions. Hiro was beside her, guiding her through the intricacies of his techniques. Each flick of his wrist, each slicing motion, felt foreign yet exhilarating, like foreign notes of a melody she had always wanted to play. She couldn't help but analyze her kitchen through his eyes, wondering if their collaboration could spawn something truly unique. But as they whisked together their ideas and discussed flavors, a subtle tension lurked. Outside their culinary sanctuary, the rival chef loomed larger than life, sabotaging Jasmine's every step. He thrived off the assumption that her newfound collaboration with Hiro was just a fleeting moment, a mistake destined to be righted. But what if he was right? Jasmine pushed those thoughts aside. She recalled Hiro's admiration for her creative spirit, urging her to craft something beyond herself. "Create from who you are," Hiro said, as they plated a dish, a fusion of her southern roots and his Japanese sensibilities. "The judges will see your truth." His words hung in the air. Jasmine's heart pounded, a fusion of hope and dread. What if her truth wasn't enough? She looked at the ingredients before her, each representing a piece of her identity, a part of the story she believed in. The day of the competition arrived with an oppressive gloom as gray clouds gathered above. She felt small yet larger than life, battling against the weight of her dreams. With her apron tied tightly and her knives sharpened, she stood before the judges, a panel of renowned culinary experts who looked at her expectantly. She could feel their scrutiny, their stares slicing through her like a serrated knife, heightened by her growing anxiety. The clock began to tick, and the sense of 100 kitchens melded together, drowning Jasmine in an overwhelming sensory experience. Elation and terror danced hand in hand as she prepped her dish, technique flirting with intuition.
Each movement felt monumental, a culmination of every experience, every hour spent behind the diner counter, every neglected dream clawing to the surface. As she sautéed her vegetables, she could almost hear her children's voices in her head. "Mom, cook like the chefs on TV." Could she silence her self-doubt, that nagging internal critic that reminded her of every failed attempt and every insecure moment? Jasmine poured her heart into the sauté pan, blending the spices not just to impress the judges, but to honor herself, her journey, and the faces of her children looking up at her with wide, innocent eyes. The moment of truth approached. With every second that ticked down, she felt a growing urgency, the need to prove she was more than just a waitress, more than just a mother trying to reconcile her responsibilities with her dreams. The taste of victory felt tantalizingly close, yet the specter of failure loomed, a shadowy figure refusing to relent. Then, as she presented her dish to the judges, she caught a glimpse of the rival chef smirking at the sidelines. The spark of resentment ignited within her. This was her opportunity, and she would not let anyone undermine that. She took a deep breath, centering herself, channeling every ounce of determination she had felt in that diner kitchen, every whisper of support from Hero, and all her hopes for a better future. "Time's up," called the judge, cutting through her thoughts. Jasmine raised her head, resolve solidifying in her core. There was no retreat now. She had come too far to back down. With her heart racing, she prepared to face not just the judges, but the ghost of her doubts. The moment had arrived, and with it, the chance to define what it truly meant for her to be a chef. But as she stepped forward, a voice croaked from the sidelines, a voice she recognized cutting through the chaos. It was her ex-husband, drawn to the spotlight she had finally reached for. "Jasmine, what are you doing here?" he called, the bitterness of their past sharp in the air. Her heart dropped, leaving her at the brink of choice, torn between the lingering pain of their history and the promise of her future. Would she allow his presence to destabilize her, or would she channel that energy into a fierce resolve? In that tense moment, everything hung in the balance. Jasmine felt the weight of her ex-husband's voice slice through her focus, momentarily grounding her in a storm of emotions she thought she had silenced months ago. He stood there, a stark reminder of failure and resentment, but also of the strength she had garnered to break free from his shadow. As the judges' gazes bore down on her, she felt a simmering determination ignite within her. "Whatever you think I'm doing here, I've earned my place," she shouted, surprising even herself. The words tumbled out, a compelling mix of defiance and recognition.
She was more than the choices of her past. She was on the verge of becoming the chef she always envisioned. With a deep breath, she turned back to the judges, steeling herself against the distraction. Each of them had their own biases, their own histories that shaped their judgments. But she couldn't allow herself to be influenced by what she feared from her ex-husband. She needed to reflect her truth, her culinary journey. Jasmine placed her dish before the panel, each ingredient carefully chosen to tell her story. She infused it with love, a stubborn reminder that she was no longer a mere participant in her life, but a main player wielding a spatula of hope and ambition. The vibrant colors contrasted starkly against the dull whites of the plates, as if her dish was screaming for recognition, even respect. The lead judge leaned in, inhaling the aroma wafting upwards, his expression shifting from skepticism to intrigue. She watched intently as he took his first bite, silently praying for the moment to unfold in her favor. Time stretched, her heart pounding like a drum solo. Could this dish reflect her childhood dreams? Could her life as a mother marry the kaleidoscope of flavors that danced on the plate? Amidst the overwhelming tension, she remembered Hero's words, echoing in her mind like the lyrics to a cherished song. "Create from who you are."
She had poured her essence into that dish, not just for the competition, but to reclaim her identity. This was her breakthrough, her reclamation of joy and creativity. Regardless of what the judges said, or her ex-husband's presence, she was standing firm in the face of adversity. The judges began to discuss amongst themselves, their murmurs rising to a crescendo. Jasmine's breath caught as she considered the possibility of validation, a tangible acknowledgement of her efforts. Would they recognize her potential? The harsh reality of competition weighed heavily on her shoulders, and the rival chef's smirk didn't help quiet the storm of insecurities brewing within her. I can't let him take this from me, she thought, feeling the surge of defiance shift into clarity. This was not just about winning against him, it was about winning in her own life, proving that she could transcend her circumstances and chase a destiny deeply rooted in flavor, resilience, and tenacity. As she focused back on the judges, their eyes flickered with judgment, intrigue, and something deeper, appreciation for the craft they had dedicated their lives to understanding. Jasmine's heart surged again with hope, driving her voice to tremble with sincerity. I wanted to represent the flavors of my childhood while marrying it with what I've learned, a little bit of home, a little bit of adventure. At that moment, she felt a shift, not just in the atmosphere, but within herself. The butterflies in her stomach transformed into a fierce resolve, a recognition that she had the power to take control of her narrative.
As the lead judge motioned for more, that eye contact seemed to invite her, the invitation to navigate her story further, deeper, creating connections that transcended mere culinary skills. The sound of applause might echo around her soon, but it was the inner applause that truly mattered. She could redefine not only what it meant to be a chef, but what it meant to be Jasmine. And then, just as her heart soared with excitement, the rival chef pushed through the throng of contestants, determination etched across his face. "You think this is over?" he snarled. Jasmine braced herself for the battle ahead, knowing her journey had only just begun. The air crackled with tension as Jasmine remained rooted to the spot, the rival chef's words heavy with challenge. He stepped closer, trying to invade her space, but she held her ground. This moment was defining, a test she hadn't anticipated, but knew she had to face head-on. "What do you want?" She struggled to keep the tremor from her voice, betraying her resolve. Did he think she would crumble so easily? Her eyes narrowed, fueled by frustration and determination. "I'm just here to remind you that this isn't just about flavors. It's about who has the guts to take it all," he sneered, his body tense with aggression. Did he not see that she had already summoned every ounce of grit she possessed? "Then I'll show you exactly what I'm made of." The statement slipped from her lips, confident yet tinged with the lingering fear of her own vulnerability. Jasmine chose to channel the doubt into strength, a choice that felt both liberating and terrifying. It was an act of reclamation, not just of a title, but of herself. She turned her attention back to the judges, keenly aware of the scrutiny her rival was invoking. They were poised on the edge of their seats, tension evident in the way they leaned in towards the spectacle unfolding before them. This was not solely about culinary prowess. It was a raw display of ambition, of survival in a world that often discounted femininity and creativity. The lead judge cleared his throat to regain control of the situation, and Jasmine looked up, realizing the moment was larger than her dish or this competition. It encapsulated a journey towards self-actualization, an opportunity to showcase not just flavors, but the resilience of spirit. Food connects cultures, and I'm here to fuse those stories together. Her words, now sharper and more deliberate, drew attention to her narrative. There was weight to her message, her passion for bringing comfort from her roots into a modern light. The energy shifted. She could see the judges processing not just her food, but the authenticity behind it. "Let me bring you on a journey," she said, her tone shifting into one of invitation. "Growing up as a black woman in a community rich with flavors, I felt the warmth of a grandmother's kitchen stirring my dreams. Let this dish bridge my past and what I'm aspiring to create today."
The flicker of understanding ignited in the judge's eyes. They were no longer just tasting food. They were observing a transformation guided by purpose. Jasmine felt the momentum of their interest pushing back against the rival chef's disdain, propelling her into a sphere of confidence. But as the judging process continued, Jasmine knew that this single moment wasn't the culmination. It was merely a launchpad. As the contestant numbers dwindled, her fear that loomed at the back of her mind didn't disappear, it morphed into a path forward. She couldn't forget the intricate twists of her life, especially the scars inflicted by her ex-husband. But now, those memories fueled her passion rather than shrouded her journey in shame. After the tense exchange, she grabbed her spatula and faced the bench again, determined to elevate her craft to align perfectly with who she had become. The thought ignited a fire. She was no longer just participating to prove someone wrong. She was here to show herself that she could rise, flourish, and ultimately thrive. Just as she prepared for the next round, a whispered conversation between judges caught her attention. Not just the flavor, but the story behind it. There's potential here. With that, the urgency of her mission crystallized further. This moment of validation could blossom into a new chapter, one that might beckon with opportunity, shifting her narrative. But her rival was not done. He hovered nearby like a storm cloud, seething as he overheard the words of approval. Jasmine sensed the brewing tension. It was far from over. If she had learned anything, it was not merely about competition. It was about embracing her journey amidst adversities that threatened to engulf her. The next round would not just test her culinary skills, but her willpower to transcend doubts, both from without and within. Could she create a dish that reflected her true self against this looming confrontation? "Just wait," she whispered, her resolve steeled. She was ready to face not only the challenge of the competition, but the shadows of her past as well. And as she turned to prepare her next dish, Jasmine could only wonder, how far could she go if she truly embraced her identity? Jasmine took a deep breath as she gathered her ingredients, her mind buzzing with the process ahead. This round was critical, and she needed to transform her urge to prove herself into a culinary masterpiece. She had felt the warmth of the judge's approval, but underneath it whispered a lingering doubt. Could she truly deliver on the promise she had made to herself? Determination surged within her as she recalled her grandmother's kitchen. The scent of spices, the vivacity of summer gatherings, laughter and love. They infused her cooking with the sort of strength that lay in her heritage, both simple and profound. The rival chef's aggression faded into the background of her thoughts. He was an obstacle, not the definition of her worth.
She was building not for him, but for her journey. As she chopped, her hands moved with an intensity that mirrored the passion within. Each slice of meat spoke of precision, recalling moments spent cooking alongside her grandmother, observing each technique, each nuance carried through generation. It was an intimate act, connected to her roots. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the images flood her memory. The rhythms of her past were now the rhythm of her actions. The clock ticked ominously, loud against the backdrop of her focused mindset. Ingredients sizzled in the pan, forming a melody that was merely a preface to the symphony she hoped to compose. She was creating more than a dish. She was building a narrative, a representation of her evolution from a woman marked by her past into one who actively claimed her space in the culinary world. As she played it, Jasmine felt an unexpected flicker of self-doubt creep in. What if it wasn't enough? What if she stumbled? The shadow of her rival loomed, and that feeling, the ache for validation, for courage, was provoked by his very presence. But rather than let it crush her spirit, she questioned it, turning it on its head. This was her moment to breathe life into her truth, to encapsulate the essence of her journey into every bite. She stepped back, surveying her dish, vibrant colors, a composition that told her story. It was a representation of her culture and an expression of resilience. Memories of her grandmother's laughter blended seamlessly with the spices that danced playfully on her plate. This was more than just food. It was a language, articulating her experiences and aspirations. As she turned to face the judges, she squared her shoulders, sending a silent message to herself. There was no turning back now. The path she chose was never going to be rigid or predictable, and embracing that unpredictability was revolutionary. She wasn't merely participating, she was paving her own way. With that realization, she began her presentation. This dish embodies the music of my past, weaving my heritage into modern culinary art. Her voice rang clear, transforming nervous energy into an exuberant confidence that swelled within her. Jasmine felt the fear that once consumed her morph into a fierce conviction. She was reclaiming her identity, piece by piece, moment by moment. But as she engaged the judges, her rival's glare burned through her confidence, an unrelenting storm threatening to unleash its fury. She would need to remain steady to withstand whatever psychological warfare was coming her way. In that moment, Jasmine recognized that this was only the force of her own evolution in play. Her journey demanded that she embrace this confrontation, that she rise above criticism and expectation. Could she truly shatter the deadly doubts that tainted her resolve, or would the insidious whispers of insecurity drown the symphony she attempted to orchestrate?
The uncertainty enveloped her as the rival chef approached, smirk plastered on his face, ready to undermine. Jasmine straightened, pulse quickening. What had she truly discovered about herself? And was this the moment where she would unveil her inner strength? "Ready for a real challenge?" he taunted, blood in the water. Jasmine inhaled sharply. The moment of truth lay ahead, waiting to test not just her dish, but the very core of her identity. What revelation awaited her just beyond this culinary battleground? The tension in the air intensified as Jasmine faced her rival, whose mocking gaze attempted to unravel her confidence. Breathing heavily, she focused on the sensations coursing through her, both anxiety and a new resolve. This was not merely a cooking competition. It had evolved into a battle of identities, aspirations, and dreams. "Care to explain why your dish is worthy of the title?" he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. Jasmine's heart raced, but she wasn't about to let him twist her focus. She had come too far to let anyone define her value, least of all someone who thrived on intimidation. "Every element in this dish tells a story," she replied, her voice steady, pushing through the overwhelming urge to react emotionally. She had learned that in cooking and in life, control was paramount. Each ingredient represented a chapter from her past and a step in her journey forward. The boldness in her delivery surprised even her. This was not just about the food, it was about her evolution as a chef and as a person. She watched for signs of its effect on the judges. Their expressions were inscrutable, but Jasmine was learning to read between the lines, to decipher subtle changes. A raised brow here, a thoughtful smile there. Her words were powerful tools in this duel. They could elevate her dish to a narrative of triumph instead of mere sustenance. Glancing back at her competitor, Jasmine envisioned the path she had taken to reach this moment. Each struggle had been a stepping stone she could leverage, facing rejection, battling self-doubt, and overcoming expectations. They were all milestones leading her to this confrontation. Swiftly, she turned her focus inward, channeling that energy, reminding herself of the warmth she had felt from her grandmother's embrace, the stories shared over steaming pots, the laughter that echoed in the kitchen. The judges prodded her for more details about her process, keenly aware of the back and forth between her and her rival. Jasmine dove into her thought process, how she balanced tradition and innovation, modern techniques paired with heritage flavors. Again, she felt that flicker of doubt, a whisper urging her to falter, but she smothered it. This was her spotlight. She would not let it dim. Moments stretched into eternity as she navigated between passion and pressure, each word solidifying her position in this high-stakes game.
She was no longer a participant at the mercy of others. She was a force in her own right. Jasmine meticulously explained that culinary art was a reflection of identity, a way to connect with others through shared experiences. The judges nodded, their appreciation seeming to shift the atmosphere slightly, as if they too were momentarily drawn into her orbit. Yet her rival wasn't finished. "Cliché doesn't make a dish memorable, Jasmine. What's so special about your grandma's recipes compared to mine?" he challenged, aiming to strike at the heart of her resolve. Jasmine hesitated, not out of uncertainty, but from a solid grounding in her narrative. This wasn't about embellishing her family's legacy or competing for memories. It was about her distinct voice, woven from those experiences. "It's not just the recipes," she said, her determination hardening with clarity. "It's the love, the tradition, the resilience that's in each morsel. This isn't just food. It's my journey, my history, and it embodies the spirit of those who came before me." The weight of her declaration pressed against the silence that followed, challenging the anticipated currents of criticism with forceful authenticity. It was a decisive moment. She could feel growth simmering beneath the surface of her insecurities, and understanding that she was carving a space for herself, not just in the kitchen, but in the world. Yet just as she began to revel in this newfound self-awareness, the judges whispered among themselves, their verdict on the horizon threatening to disrupt her burgeoning confidence. Would her history resonate, or would it be drowned out by her rival's hollow bravado? Jasmine squared her shoulders, resolved once again to confront whatever awaited with strength. She had built momentum, and she would not shy away from the culmination of her struggles. Drawing a sharp breath, Jasmine prepared for the verdict that could either solidify her growth or plunge her into uncertainty. The moment of revelation neared, and she sensed that regardless of the outcome, her awareness of self had irrevocably changed. Would she emerge triumphant, or was there still more for her to uncover on this path of self-discovery? As the judge's silence filled the air, Jasmine's heart pounded, a crescendo of uncertainty and hope colliding in one pivotal moment. What awaited her on the other side of this judgment would mirror not just her culinary destiny, but her entire journey forward. The judges finally emerged from their hushed deliberation, the weight of their decision shifting the air palpably around Jasmine. She felt the intensity of their gaze like a spotlight, both exhilarating and suffocating.
A small bead of sweat traced down her temple as she steeled herself for the announcement. Her heart beat in sync with the pulse of her kitchen dreams, the culmination of years spent honing her craft, facing countless rejections, absorbing lessons from anonymity to this very moment.
"We have reached a decision," the head judge announced, voice commanding yet measured. Jasmine's breath quickened, and she found herself gripping the edge of the table, nails digging into the wood in a raw attempt to anchor her racing thoughts. She relished her moment of depth, a liberating sensation washing over her. This wasn't just about winning, it was about acceptance and validation, a solidifying moment of self-affirmation after a lifetime of striving for acknowledgement. "Jasmine, your dish showcased an impressive narrative interwoven with skill and innovation." Their words ignited a flicker of pride in her chest, yet she was careful to guard it against the throes of entitlement. She had earned this acknowledgement, but she wasn't done growing. The journey was still unfolding, and there were still to be battles ahead, internally and externally. Yet the rival's voice cut through her moment of triumph. "Sure, it's narrative-driven, but cooking is about flavor and execution. My dish had that in spades." He leaned heavily into his claim, as if assembling a final defense against impending defeat. Jasmine glanced at him, his frustration bleeding outwards, and understood, a surge of empathy that surprised even her. His toughness was a mask for vulnerability, fighting against the same tide of insecurities that churned in her own heart. "Cooking isn't just about flavors," Jasmine countered, new vigor coursing through her. "It's about connection. It's about telling a story that resonates, that lingers in the memory." As she spoke, the words tumbled out with newfound urgency, each syllable lifting her credibility higher. The judges smiled, visibly impressed by her conviction. "It seems Jasmine's journey through this competition has not only showcased her skills, but also highlighted her deep connection to the narrative of food," the head judge remarked. In that instant, Jasmine felt a shift within herself. She was not just defending what she had created, but rather she was illuminating her entire essence. As applause enveloped her, Jasmine took a moment to absorb the victory. In every clapping hand was an acknowledgement of her journey, the struggle, the love, the heartbreak, and the triumph she had stitched into each dish served. But the thrill of this achievement sparked something deeper. She recognized that with success also came responsibility, not to others, but to herself. With the competition nearing its end, Jasmine became acutely aware that the skills she had honed were mere tools in a much larger endeavor. Her ambitions reached beyond mere recognition. They craved the opportunity to influence and connect with others through her food, to build bridges with her culinary creations that transcended mere consumption. It was no longer enough to simply showcase her talent. She felt an insatiable desire to create meaningful culinary experiences that would touch lives. Yet, with every achievement, shadows lingered of the uncertain path that lay ahead.
There was an eternal question awaiting her answer. Who would she become next? The reflection in her heart compelled her to seek out new territories, push the boundaries of her skills, and broaden her horizons. As the competition drew to a close, Jasmine realized she needed to embark on the next chapter of her journey and embrace the daunting unknown with the same fearlessness she had fostered through her culinary battle. With a renewed vision, she set her sights towards culinary innovation that honored her roots while embracing new cultures and techniques. She wasn't merely a participant in the world of cooking, she was now a pioneer on the brink of transformation. And as Jasmine surveyed the grandeur of possibilities before her, she instinctively understood that her next challenge loomed. It would involve not just finding her identity in a new culinary landscape, but confronting the doubts and expectations that would surely arise along the way. The moment had come to take the next courageous step, a leap into uncharted waters where she would discover the extent of her potential. With a deep breath, Jasmine resolved to face it boldly, knowing very well that the journey would continue to redefine her through each new dish and encounter. What new elements awaited her on this path of exploration? Would she harness her growth into a movement that could resonate with many? And most importantly, would she keep her roots close as she reached for the stars? Jasmine stood in the quiet of her kitchen, the soft hum of fluorescent lights filling the room as the last echoes of applause faded into the distance. She felt a strange mix of exhilaration and trepidation settle in her stomach. The competition had amplified her exposure, yet it commanded profound introspection.
This newfound recognition was not simply a trophy to cradle, it was a call to refine her vision and challenge the boundaries of her culinary identity. As she prepped ingredients for the evening special at the restaurant, her hands moved instinctively through established routines. But each chop and stir pulled at a deeper curiosity. Jasmine began to question what truly defined her as a chef. Was she merely a collection of recipes and techniques, or was there more? An essence, a cultural lineage that needed exploration. Memories wafted back like the fragrance of spices, her grandmother cooking traditional dishes from their heritage, weaving stories through culinary artistry, guided her spirit. Jasmine felt the urge to honor this connection, yet the outside world beckoned her to innovate, to blend, to reconstruct the narrative she had grown up with. Jasmine, the restaurant's owner, Marco, entered the kitchen, breaking her reverie. "We need to expand the menu, bring something fresh that showcases your creativity." His voice was firm yet inviting, and it felt to Jasmine like an open door into the exploration she craved. "Fresh, huh?" she mused, her mind racing.
What if I combined elements of my culture with something entirely different? What if I explored global influences? "Now you're thinking," Marco encouraged. "Your last dish told a story, but what about a dish that celebrates intersectionality? You've got the talent, now push those boundaries." The suggestion ignited a spark, or inauthentic. Would her heritage transform from a grounding force into just another gimmick? Taking a deep breath, she let herself imagine a dish, a fragrant curry mingled with Japanese miso, each flavor telling the story of migration and mingling cultures. As she conceptualized this dish, the cooking process morphed into a reflective exercise of her journey, the challenges of growing up in two worlds, the struggle for acceptance, and the ever-present dance between past and present. After a few attempts, she finally plated her creation. The colors burst vibrantly against the white dish, already telling the story of her past while embracing an optimistic future. With each bite, she could feel the complexities of the flavors echoing her internal struggle for belonging. The mirror of her culinary craftsman was becoming clearer. She was not only a vessel of tradition, but also a bold architect of her own narrative. But thoughts nagged at her. How would the customers perceive this dish? Would they appreciate the fusion, or would they recoil at the perceived dissonance? The anticipation morphed into a tight knot in her stomach. That evening, as she presented her creation to the customers, Jasmine caught glimpses of their initial reactions. Some faces lit up, while others seemed puzzled, scrutinizing the amalgamation of flavors on their plates. Would they connect with her story, or add her dish to the list of misfires? The uncertainty was potent, infusing her thoughts with tension as she watched the first fork dive in. At that moment, she understood the risk of authenticity often came hand in hand with the potential for rejection, a revelation that echoed the challenges faced throughout her career. Accepting this was part of her evolution. Embracing discomfort was a prerequisite for growth. But as the first feedback trickled in, would the responses validate her leap or echo her fears? Jasmine's breath hitched in anticipation, her journey teetering on the threshold of revelation. Jasmine's heart raced as the first few diners took their bites, their faces morphing through a spectrum of expressions. In the delicate balance between hope and dread, she observed their reactions as if they were intricate dance steps, each providing clues to how her creation resonated. Would they recognize the layers of her identity woven into the dish, or would they see only a confusing clash of flavors?
A couple at the corner table shared a knowing glance, their forks moving in sync as they savored the curry. Jasmine's breath caught. Perhaps there was a connection being forged, a moment where her culinary narrative touched their lives. Yet across the room, a woman blinked, her brow furrowed in uncertainty. Jasmine's gut twisted. Was she misreading the experience? An unwelcome chill crept into her thoughts. What if this dish symbolized not her liberation, but an artistic blunder? Marco approached, a smile creeping onto his face, but Jasmine could only focus on the whirlwind of uncertainty authenticating her fears. "They're intrigued, they're connecting with it," he encouraged, his voice a balm against the storm brewing inside her. Jasmine nodded, forcing a smile, but behind the facade of confidence, doubt lingered. Every plate returned to the kitchen told a story. Every empty fork both emphasized her triumphs and showcased her vulnerabilities. She began to re-examine the significance of her decision to intertwine traditions. Was she merely clinging to nostalgia, or boldly forging a new path? With new focus, she turned back to her work, vowing to embrace initial feedback, good or bad, as part of her growth. She reminded herself that even the most powerful flavors often needed time to balance. Jasmine planned her next dish, a brightly herbaceous salad, incorporating a twist of Japanese yuzu citrus. The melding of cultures would speak to her journey, all while honoring her grandmother's legacy. As she chopped, plated, and adjusted, the minutes slid by seemingly too fast. Each ingredient choice was deliberate, a moment of self-reflection crystallizing in her mind as she faced the task ahead.
This time, Jasmine felt a whisper of daring courage blossoming amid her reflections. The blend of her roots with new inspirations became not merely a cuisine, but a canvas for her evolving identity. She imagined how each dish could narrate her story, an unfinished novel that needed continual updates with fresh chapters. But that glimmer of confidence was disrupted when she overheard a pair of diners discussing a similar curry they had tried at another restaurant. Their words, though innocuous in context, pulled at her insecurities. They seemed to collate experiences, comparing her dish not as an expression of artistry, but as just another item on a familiar list. Her stomach must have dropped. Was her culinary voice merely an echo? Jasmine felt her spirit waver, battling against an urge to slip into self-doubt. If this moment could potentially define her professional trajectory, how could she redirect the narrative? The kitchen buzzed around her, but she was momentarily isolated in a tempest where aspiration conflicted with fear of imitation. Then Marco appeared beside her again, clearly attuned to her turmoil. "Jasmine, you're on the verge of something incredible. Trust your voice," he encouraged gently.
"Trust my voice," she repeated quietly, an incantation of sorts. What did her voice truly sound like in the cacophony of the culinary world? Could she carve out a niche that felt genuinely her own amid influences and comparisons? As she prepared for a new round of service, Jasmine clung tightly to her conviction. She would resist the temptation to morph her identity to fit a mold. It was time to step beyond curated assumptions and embrace the powerful narrative she was forging within each dish. But internally, the question lingered. When would her raw authenticity be recognized and celebrated instead of scrutinized? As service picked up speed, Jasmine felt a compelling shift building within her, one that suggested that the time had come to face not just the public's perception, but her own insecurities. A challenge bigger than her culinary creations loomed ahead, one that would ultimately reshape the very foundation of her professional soul. The moment to confront her deepest fears had arrived. Jasmine stood before the grill, her reflection in the metal surface flickering with the flames beneath. Today marked a turning point, a defining moment in her culinary journey where she would embrace her identity and face the gnawing insecurities that had threatened to undermine her aspirations. The weight of expectations hung heavy in the air, but with each inhalation she gathered clarity. Her earlier doubts had transformed into a fierce determination, igniting an urgency to redefine what it meant to be a chef in this ever-evolving landscape. Stepping into her role as not just a cook, but as a storyteller, she envisioned a dish that would embody her journey, a marriage of her southern roots and Japanese influences, crafted with precision and care. As she sautéed the vegetables, Jasmine recalled the warmth of her grandmother's kitchen, the laughter that infused the air with comfort, the sense of connection that transcended generations. She would channel that energy into her food, allowing her culinary identity to flourish unapologetically as she created a dish that resonated with multiple cultures. This time, she was not just blending flavors, she was weaving the fabric of her identity into every component. Her hands moved with solid confidence as she plated her creation, a fusion of flavors that radiated her essence. The vibrant colors burst forth from the dish, a visual representation of her spirit and the story she yearned to share. With renewed focus, she considered how to present her culinary narrative, the deep significance of her cultural heritage, the courage to innovate, and the excitement of crafting a unique identity. As she stepped into the dining room, a thrumming anticipation pulsed through her veins. This was no longer solely about the approval of the judges or the perceptions of the diners. It was about her journey towards self-actualization and the boldness to share her truth.
The sound of forks clinking echoed softly as she approached the guests, ready to articulate her vision. "This dish honors my grandmother's traditions while integrating Japanese culinary elements," she explained, her voice steady and filled with the passion behind her creation. "It's a culinary dialogue that reflects my experiences, marrying the heat of southern spices with the intricate nuances of Japanese cuisine." The diners were engaged, sharing curious glances and eager bites. Jasmine felt her heart race as she witnessed reactions, expressions of surprise, satisfaction, and delight playing across the faces of those savoring her dish. The warmth of their appreciation wrapped around her like a soft embrace, reinforcing her resolve. In that moment it clicked. This wasn't merely about winning accolades or comparisons. It was about connection, connecting with her audience through the power of her food, sharing the stories that shaped her life, and celebrating the resilience that had brought her to this point. She felt the weight of her doubts lift, replaced by an authentic sensation of fulfillment. Jasmine had traveled so far from being merely a waitress to becoming a recognized chef, not just in title, but in spirit. As she received compliments and validation from the guests, her heart soared.
Each word was a reminder of the paths she had navigated, the challenges encountered head-on, and the transformation that had occurred within her. Marco approached, a proud smile stretching across his face. "Jasmine, I knew you could do it. This dish tells a powerful story, and it's exactly what our customers are craving, a connection." A sense of pride surged within her chest. This was the culmination of not only her culinary skills, but also her personal journey, a growth that was tangible, permanent, and rooted in her identity. She had written her narrative through her food, melding tradition with innovation, passion with precision, and fear with fierce courage. Stepping back into the kitchen, she felt invigorated and ready to embrace future challenges. Her journey wasn't just about flavors or techniques, it was about her voice, a powerful force she was finally claiming. With renewed purpose, Jasmine began sketching ideas for multiple new dishes, each poised to reflect her evolving identity as a chef. The weight she had carried for so long transformed into momentum, propelling her forward into exploration and experimentation. She had conquered her internal battles, she had demonstrated courage in the face of self-doubt, and a commitment to authenticity that would guide her into new culinary territories. As Jasmine continued to craft beautiful dishes, she recognized that her journey was a continuous evolution. She wouldn't shy away from risks, nor would she allow the shadows of her past to dim her brilliance. This was her moment. She emerged not just as a chef, but as a proud beacon of resilience and creativity, ready to share her unique flavors with the world.
With a steady hand and an unwavering heart, Jasmine vowed to embrace every culinary challenge ahead, to connect others through her art, and to celebrate the beauty of melding cultures, tastes, and stories that resonated within her. Above all, she was finally stepping into the narrative she was destined to create. Now it's your turn. You need to subscribe now to the channel to ensure you never miss the next exclusive emotional stories that unfold like Jasmine's. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support matters. Comment your reactions and theories about Jasmine's journey. We want to hear from you. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share this journey of self-discovery.